You're listening to the Mind Over Murder podcast.
My name is Bill Thomas. I'm a writer, consulting producer, and now podcaster. I am now trying to use my experience as the brother of a murder victim to help other victims of violent crime. I'm working on a book on the unsolved Colonial Parkway Murders, and I'm the co-administrator of the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook group together with Kristin Dilley.
My name is Kristin Dilley. I'm a writer, a researcher, a teacher, and a victims advocate, as well as the social media manager and co-administrator for the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook page with my partner in crime, Bill Thomas. Welcome to Mind Over Murder. I'm Kristin Dilley.
And I'm Bill Thomas.
And we are joined today by Kathy Kleiner Rubin, who is here to talk to us about her new book, A Light in the Dark, Surviving More Than Ted Bundy. Kathy, thank you so much for joining us. We are thrilled to have you.
Thank you very much for inviting me to come on.
I'm not sure the two of us have ever been more excited to have a guest on because we are both such big fans of you personally and professionally.
Thank you very much. That's nice.
For our listeners who may not know who you are, can you tell us just a little bit of background about yourself?
I was born in Miami, and I lived there for a number of years, and I consider myself a serial survivor. Over the years, I had childhood lupus, and I was in 7th grade at that point. Then I was attacked by serial killer Ted Bundy, and then I've gone through breast cancer, stage 2 breast cancer, mastectomy. That's who I am in a nutshell, but my stories are very different than just saying one sentence.
I love that idea of being a serial survivor. That takes bravery and that takes guts. Was it hard for you to sit and write about surviving all of these things?
It was a roller coaster of emotions and love. It took me 2.5 years to write it because I wanted to get it right. I wanted to tell of myself and I wanted to expose everything about me so that the readers did know who I was and why I survived and why I persevered. I enjoyed writing it once I got into it. In the beginning, I was scared and nervous and everything, but then it just started flowing.
So how did you meet your co-writer, Emilie Le Beau Lucchesi? How did the two of you get connected?
She actually emailed a mutual friend, Tori Tilfer, who wrote the article on me for Rolling Stone. And that was back in 2018. And Emilie contacted Tori and said, if she's ever interested in telling her story, I would love to talk with her. And here's my email address, have her call me or email me. And I think it was a year later, she talked to Tori again and said, Kathy never responded to me. I'd really like to talk to her. So Tori got my attention, and that's how Emilie and I met.
What made you decide that now is the time to tell your story about surviving all of these things, lupus and cancer and Bundy?
It was the right time now because I'm settled in my mind and my husband and I are very close together. And I feel like I'm at a pause in my life that I can talk about what happened. Every time I speak about all of this, it helps heal me. So I'm in a position now where my son's grown up and it's just my husband and I, and we're in a good place. So I thought it was finally time.
That's actually something I was going to ask about, but you went ahead and said it. So I'm going to follow you for a second. I've heard you say a couple of times that every time you tell your story, it helps to heal you. Can you expand a little bit about that? I know there are plenty of people in your place who maybe wouldn't want to talk about it.
I find that, especially with the attack, I needed to know that it wasn't my fault and that I would get through it because that's me. And my parents were there to help and family were there to help me. And I didn't want too many people around me. I knew this was my attack and it was my story. And when people say, I don't know, what can I do for you? I just say, oh, can you move those flowers around? Just to give someone something to do because everyone's don't know what to do. I find it heals me because I feel good about the people around me and I want to heal them. So by talking about everything, it just puts a positive light on what I've gone through so they can feel better.
Now, you and I were on a panel together at CrimeCon a couple of weeks ago, and you mentioned this idea that you're telling the story and even retelling the story is a healing process for you. And yet the people in the audience also responded incredibly positively. Do you feel like there's something going on in terms of this exchange of your life experiences and inspiring people?
I hope so. I know when I tell my story, I reach a lot of people on a different level. Either they've been through trauma or they're going through it, and they can hear my story. And I hope it gives them strength because it's their story too. They need to talk about it. Whomever will listen to them. The first day you're attacked or you're traumatized, you're a victim. The next day you're a survivor. And you have to get that thought in your head. To do that on your own, there's people around, seek help. But I think people relate with me because of the breast cancer or just because of the lupus and, of course, for the Ted Bundy's attack. So I like touching people on different levels and let them know they can get through anything. They just have to do it themselves, but they can do it and they should seek help for whenever they need to.
What is it like for you to be in a room full of people who are waiting with bated breath to hear your story? I remember the first time that you spoke at CrimeCon because nobody wanted to miss that session, and people were wall to wall, standing room only, and you could hear a pin drop. It was intense. What is that like for you, being up in front of a huge group of people, like telling your story?
I love it. I love it because I try to connect with people. I try to look around the audience and I want to take them into my story. I don't want to just tell a story and just be a story to tell. I want people to be drawn in. And when I talk about the sorority house and my bedroom and everything, I want them to put themselves in the same place and walk through it with me. Because each time, like the attack, I walked myself into my room. And after it was over, I got to see my room before I left Tallahassee. I walked in and I got to see the room the way it was messed up. And I knew this is what happened to me. This is where it was. And I could relate that other people have other things they're going through. To see that many people at one time just makes me feel good. And I just want to connect with people. And to see so many people, I really did hope I connected with them.
Do you get nervous? We've seen you in front of 1,000 people or more in these massive hotel ballrooms at CrimeCon and other conferences, and you seem completely comfortable up there.
My knees shake when I first get out there, and I look around, and then I'm like, this is what it's going to do. This is what I'm doing today. Then I keep my story in order so that the lupus and then the Bundy and then the breast cancer. And I want to tell all my little thoughts in between the way I've recovered and recuperated in my own little way. And I think that's important for people to hear.
Your old hat at CrimeCon now. Was this your third CrimeCon?
My
in
second.
Orlando? Second. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then I know we saw you at Savannah Crime Expo. What is most interesting to you about these mass gatherings of true crime fans?
I find it interesting. The people go there for so many diverse reasons. They want to know true crime, or they want to hear about ways of taking people down and discovering when a subject is finally caught and going to be prosecuted. I think people want to hear all these stories. They appreciate it. They want the knowledge of what goes on behind scenes, I think. Learn about the DNA and learn about other things that they're interested in. So I think there's, a lot of people there for a lot of reasons.
Kathy, when you and I first met, I think it was in 2019 at the ASOC conference, and ASOC stands for the American Investigative Society of Cold Cases. I saw you speak in front of a couple of hundred investigators, forensics experts. There were students there. Our mutual friend, Cheryl Mack McCollum, had reached out to me and she said, are you going to ASOC, which was in Albany that year? And I said, yes. This is before COVID. Yeah. She said, will you watch out for my friend, Kathy Kleiner? And I said, I'd be honored to. So I sought you out and introduced myself. The day you were to speak, you marched yourself up onto the stage. And I hope you don't mind me saying this. You're very petite.
Yeah, that's fine.
And the podium was very tall, and then the stage was very tall. You actually ended up stepping out from behind it so people could see you. And then you proceeded to hold this entire room, and this is a tough crowd. They were completely mesmerized by your conversation. You spoke for about 45 minutes. You told your story. And then this is the part that surprised me. I was blown away by your story and recovering, moving through these challenges, lupus, Ted Bundy, being a breast cancer survivor. And it was very inspiring. I was standing at the back of the room and you came and you stood next to me and you didn't look at me. You looked forward towards the stage and they were setting up for the next speaker, whoever that was. And you said, I've never done that before. And I said, never done what? Because remember, I've just been blown away by this amazing, magnetic public speaker. You said, I've never spoken like that about my life. And I remember turning to you and just so shocked that you had never done this before, yet you seemed so natural. You did say, gosh, I was nervous at the beginning. And I said to you, as I've said to many other public speakers, myself included, most of the nerves are in your head. People really want to hear, especially someone like you, they really want to hear what you have to say. But I was so amazed that you were so good at it and so effective in telling your story. And then to come back and stand there and not even look at me, just say, I never did that before. Has it gotten easier for you now in the last 4 years since you first started speaking out publicly?
I think so. I've got a lot more confidence in me now. And I do go out and each crowd gets larger and larger. And when I was at CrimeCon 19, there were like 500 seats set up, but they were standing up on the wall and sitting down on the floor.
I remember.
And I enjoyed it. It was a smaller crowd and I could just see everybody. And it was very emotional for me. It is my story and I want people to know it. And I don't want to just stand there and not make sense. I want to give everybody everything I have. And like I said, when I tell the story, my life story, I walk through each section that I'm doing and talking about, and I'm putting myself there. And I want the people to come along my journey with me.
One of the best moments for CrimeCon this year for me was when I was able to introduce Jane Borowski to you. And Jane survived the Connecticut River Valley serial killer. It was so moving, and I can't talk about it too terribly much or I'm going to cry. But it was so incredibly moving to see how you just embraced her and you were like, it's cool. Like, you get it. You understand because you've gone through it. How does it feel to you to meet other survivors of violent crime or people like Jane, survivors of other serial killers?
I find it healing for me to actually go to them and hug them and feel their pain, not in a weird way, but just I can hold them. And hopefully by holding them, they hold me back. And I think having been there or gone through trauma, people can get it that way. I got so many people coming and hugging me. It was great. It was just a good thing. And I think just relaying and sympathizingly understanding what they've been through.
As much as I hate to have to talk about him, he is the subject of the book. So let's get into the Bundy of it all. So
Okay.
First of all, can you tell us, why do you think the American public is still so interested in Bundy after all these years? Why do we even care about this guy anymore? Do you have any insight into that?
When he was in the courtroom and the trial was going on, it was the first time or second time or whatever, the TV cameras were allowed in the courtroom. And his persona was exactly what he wanted people to see. He wasn't himself because he wasn't anything special, but he wanted people to think he was. And I think a lot of the young girls actually who went to the trial, there were a lot that sat in the front room of the courtroom, and I just didn't get it why they were there. And then I understood some of them wanted to be, oh, look, he's next to me. Oh, look, he looked at me. Oh, man, I think he could attack me and I'd love it. And I'm like, what? Get a life. And that's their thought at that time. And I think the other women that were there were more of I can fix him. I can make him better. I should be here to talk to him or to hold him, the mother figure. So I think it was very diverse on how each of them felt. The ones that were so excited, I just didn't get. I think that started the mystique about him being a good-looking guy. And that's what he wanted people to see. He was very manipulative, and he wanted them to see who he wanted to be. And whomever that was, a student, which he never finished school. He fell out of law school. And he was a candidate. He wanted to be a candidate for the, Republican Party and all this stuff. And he didn't get very far in that. It didn't work out for him. He was actually such a loser, he'd shoplift his own clothes because he didn't have any money to buy clothes because didn't have a job. He did the talking to people who wanted to commit suicide with Ann Rule. Mm-hmm. That was showing him a bit of normal, but I think he really just wanted to hear their stories. And with those stories, it fed into what he felt like he could do or what he wanted to do. In his mind or in the other side of him, it was the evil, just horrible. I can't say enough bad words for him. He was not a charmer. He was not good looking in my mind. He was not anything in a good way. He was just a loser.
One of the things I learned from your book, and there's a lot in here to learn about you, your life, as well as Bundy, you take the air out of a bunch of these myths about him. One is that he's some sort of genius. It took the guy 8 years to graduate from college, which most people do in 4, sometimes even less. So he's not exactly a Rhodes Scholar when it comes to academics. And he's not necessarily such a brilliant strategic thinker either. You point out that in many of the examples, he's attacking these women from behind while they're asleep. This isn't the charmer. This is a guy who is lashing out at defenseless people who aren't even looking at him or whose eyes aren't even open.
He attacked women that were vulnerable in his mind. He didn't care what they looked like. He didn't care anything about them. He just wanted to kill. And he got such pleasure when he killed that he was really just worse than anything you can think of in his feelings. Or he finished his graduate school in 8 years, but he went less than 2 years to law school because he couldn't handle it, because he just wasn't with it. He just didn't have the forewithal to try to get something and do it right. He was just going through the day as he could, and then killing at night was his main thing for living.
Somehow I think Ted Bundy should be synonymous with loser more than anything else. I don't have a lot of respect for this guy. I never had much respect for him. And your book, A Light in the Dark, really highlights the fact that this guy is nothing unique and certainly no one to be looked up to.
No, he wasn't. And I can say some words about what I relate him to, but I don't think I should. But yeah, he's creepy. He was sick. He was just like not a human. When he attacked people, the girls, and he did do it from behind or attacked them with a crowbar or something, he never confronted someone and attacked them that way. Yeah, there was a couple times where men were involved when he was trying to take the girls. And one of them was a little Kimberly Leach in Lake Florida. Mm-hmm. And she was trying to he was trying to push her into a van. And a guy came up to him and said, "Oh, that's just her dad. She probably had a bad day," and pushed him in the van. And he walked away. She ended up being killed, but he didn't want to confront anybody. So if he had come to him, he probably would have just let her go and leave.
So we've covered a couple of the important misconceptions about Bundy that you'd like to see cleared up, or I guess blown up. Are there any others that we've missed? We've already talked about the fact that he wasn't really intelligent, wasn't this master criminal. What else should we be aware of here about Bundy?
When he was young, he did the typical killing the cat and he was a peeping Tom. And he had all the early signs of being distressed as a human. And he did other things as he grew older. And it's just, even in the beginning there, we know the signs now, but no one knew them then. And he just proceeded just like a psychopath would. He just followed all the stages into growing into manhood.
Do you mind telling us that story about you staring him down and how you, even as a young woman, convinced yourself, I need to buck myself up and I need to face this man?
The first time I saw him after the attack was when I was subpoenaed for the deposition. And I'd never been to one before. And it was in this long conference room. And I was walked into the room and there's a conference table in front of me. And on one side were the defense attorneys and the other side, the prosecution. I sat down, I looked at the other head of the table, and there was Ted Bundy. And he was sitting there looking so smug and so like we're wasting his time. And I put my elbows on the table and I looked at him and I thought, he's not going to get me. I don't have to be afraid now He's at the other end of the table, just where we need him to be, out on the outside. I did have to build myself up for that. And I don't remember what the questions were that either side, defense or prosecution, asked. But then when I was asked to leave and I could walk out, I told my mother, I think I'm going to throw up because that was just such an emotional setting. And I didn't expect him to be there. That was the first time I saw him. The second time I saw him was during the grand jury, and I was again subpoenaed. And there was another conference room. I sat down and he was over there. He had a light blue jacket on, and I still remember him distinctly. And this time he was acting like, oh man, just get this over with. Again, he always thought he wouldn't be charged with anything. He was so charming, he could get himself out of anything. And at that point, I was just frustrated and mad when I saw him. It was just like I was mad. I was really mad. And the third time I saw him was at the courthouse when I have to give my testimony of what happened during that night. So I did, and they heard the story, and they agreed it was time to come and put him into trial.
Now, in a situation like in the courtroom, in the third example, Kathy, you're being asked questions by a prosecutor, and then were you also asked questions by a defense attorney as well?
Yes. When I entered the courtroom and I got sworn in, and I sat in the box where you answer the questions, he was sitting in the courtroom as well. On one side at his table defense, on the other side the prosecution. And again, I just looked at him. He was antsy a little bit then, smug, like, this is going too far. Let's just get out of here now. And the prosecution did ask me questions, and I don't remember what they were. And then defense asked me a couple questions, and I was just staring at Bundy. I don't remember what they were. The last question they asked me, and I felt so good that I was going to help convict him and help take him all out of this world and hurt him bad. The one question I remember is this the man you saw in your room that night that attacked you? No, I had to say no. I don't know. And I was so upset that I couldn't help convict him at all. Mm-hmm. But I had to say that. And it bothered me for a long time.
But it was dark. Am I correct? You weren't able to see your attacker in the darkened room.
No, he came in. We were in the sorority house. I lived on the second floor, and it faced the back parking lot on the second floor. And we always had our curtain rod open because we hung plants on the curtain rods. It was at night, and it's still dark in the room. And I heard him come in. The door swished on the carpet, and it woke me up. It's about 3 a.m. And then he tripped. I heard a louder noise. We had a little footlocker between my roommate's bed and my bed. And he tripped over that. And that woke me up. Now I'm awake, and I look, and I see this figure, this black silhouette of someone standing next to me. And then I see him raise his arm up over his head. And he had something in his hand. He had a stick or something, I couldn't tell. And he slammed that wood on my face so hard that it slit my cheek open, and it looked like I had been shot. It broke my jaw in 3 places. It shattered my chin, and my face was all numb. I had 2 broken jawbones. I just was hurting a lot. At first, actually, it felt like hitting a bag of potatoes. It just was a thud. And not maybe 4 minutes later, the pain hit in. Mm-hmm. And that's when I started moaning and groaning, and my roommate heard it. So Bundy went over to that side of the bed and attacked her with the same piece of wood that he attacked me with. Bundy heard me crying now, and he didn't leave any victims alive. So he came back to my side of the bed to hit me again, but I had made myself as small as I could in a little bitty ball, and I tried to get under my sheets, and I just lay there so vulnerable in a little ball, and I thought, if he can't see me, he won't hit me. Mm-hmm. So I saw him put his arm up in the air, and he had it turned out to be a piece of firewood in his hand, and just as he was going to strike me again, the room got all light. The light shone in the room, and it was a brilliant light, and it shone in from the car that was driving someone home, a date that night, and the car pulled up into the driveway, and the lights of that car shone up into our room. Mm-hmm. Now I could see him, and he could see me, and he spooked him. He moved around a little bit. And I think he thought he was seen either by me or whatever made those lights shine up in our room. He spooked out and ran out of our bedroom door. And as the lights went out and it got dark again, I'm staying in my little bitty ball because I knew he was going to come back and hit me again. But he didn't. He didn't come back. He left the sorority at that time.
How many people did he attack at the sorority that night?
There were two. He attacked Margaret Bowman and hit her with the piece of oak club he had picked up outside our back door in the sorority on the first floor. There was a stack of firewood we used for the fireplace. And that's where he picked up a piece of wood. He picked it up and the door was broken, the back padlock. So he just waltzed right into the house and he went around to the front of the house and the wood staircase that led to the second floor. He went up those and then he turned the hall that went to my bedroom. There was a hall on the left and a hall on the right. So he came down our hall and the first door he opened was Margaret Bowman. He attacked her with the log and put the sheets up over her face so that it looked like she was sleeping. He went across the hall and attacked Lisa Levy. She was again alone in her room, and he beat her viciously with the log. He did a lot of things to her, and he bit her. And actually, the teeth marks end up being like a fingerprint because your teeth leave a natural impression that no two are alike. So after he attacked both of those girls, so he attacked two and killed two. Then myself and my roommate he attacked, but we survived. And then later on that night, he rode down the street to another girl's house, and he attacked her as well. So he attacked three and killed two.
You're listening to Mind Over Murder. We'll be right back after this word from our sponsors. We're back here at Mind Over Murder.
Out of all of the really excellent content in your book, the most important and impactful, I would say, is your 3 appendices. The third one, Appendix C, is titled How to Honor the Women and Girls Who Lost Their Lives to Bundy. And I really like that you put this together. Can you give us a quick overview of the 5 different strategies to honor the lives of those women?
The first thing was to name them, to give them a true name and put a face to that name. Don't just have, in regular Bundy books, you open the book to the page of the victims and it's one paragraph and our names are separated by commas. And my name's on that on the very bottom. And this isn't fair. I had a life. I was strong. I wanted to be in college. I was exciting. I was a sophomore. I joined Chi Omega sorority. I did a lot of frat parties, and this was my life. And I had to be taken out of that so fast. But these women were taken away so fast, and he killed them. And he didn't think anything about who their family was or who's going to be impacted by this killing, because he didn't care. He just went through in the motions of killing just because that's the way he was made and the way he worked. So I wanted to give a face and a name to each of the women and then talk about them a little bit. What were their dreams? What did they want to do? What did they do last night? Tell me about their family. And we found as much as we could about the 32 women. That made me happy because I gave them a voice and I let people know who they were. They were real people, not just victims.
I would imagine their families, if they were comfortable talking with you, probably would have enjoyed that, because here you are talking about their legacy and their lives and not just positioning them as victims.
I hope so. I've not been reached out by anybody yet. I expect to at some point, and I'd love to talk to them. Just let them know that I never knew their daughter or their sister, but I loved them.
So what are some of these other strategies? I like the English teacher is about to say that she loves your verb use here. I love your choice of verbs. For the second item here, you said stomp on and discredit the Bundy legacy. I love stomp.
Stomp. Yes.
I love that. That's a great verb.
Stomp as hard as you can.
I love that. So what does that mean when you say to discredit the Bundy legacy? What does that mean?
Just pull him apart, take him apart, and show what he's not. He was never charismatic and a good guy and had money, and everything he perceived was a lie. Mm-hmm. So I wanted the truth to be taken out, put into the equation, because he just couldn't survive as a normal person. He couldn't get over his killing sprees, and he actually would kill girls and take them into the woods and then go back to their bodies and put makeup on them and be with them again. And I can't say enough bad words. There's in my vocabulary, I don't have the words I could say. He just needed to be taken down.
At the same time, what a pathetic loser. This is a guy that couldn't interact with people in any kind of positive way, get to know people, learn about them. He's just lashing out and then going back to visit their bodies. It's just pathetic.
Yeah. He killed a lot of women, and he would take their body parts, he would cut them out and then put them in different states so that they couldn't be associated, that, oh, look, here's an arm and let's go look for the body, because he'd never find it. And here's a head. What is the body? Where is the body? And that would be in woods in another state. So he was thinking about not getting caught the whole time, was what can I do to not get caught? But he didn't care. He wasn't going to get caught in his head. He was just going to do as he pleased for as long as he wanted to.
And of course, he's operating at a time that's well before DNA and other forensic advances had taken place.
Yes.
So you would not be able to identify someone whose arm or leg or what have you is found in another location. Unlike 2023, where you might actually be able to, forgive me, piece together the story of what had happened to a victim. The science would allow that now, but it wouldn't back then.
Correct.
I like that you also mention that people need to stop victim blaming when it comes to Bundy's victims, such as, oh, she was hitchhiking, she must have deserved it, or something like that. I like that you take the point within this appendix to really focus on the social norms were different at the time. It is fine for you to walk alone, like women should be allowed to walk alone without ever having to worry, is a serial killer going to accost me from behind? I like that you guys just really went out there and said, hey, stop victim blaming.
I don't think people appreciate, too, how common hitchhiking was back then. Mm-hmm. Now, I was a young single guy in college, but I hitchhiked back and forth to my university, the University of Massachusetts, at least once a month, sometimes more often than that. I never took a bus back and forth from my parents' hometown to the University of Massachusetts. I had a sign. One side said UMass, and the other side said Lowell, which is my parents' hometown. And I kept it in the bottom of a duffel bag. When I was ready to, head home for a particular weekend, I just hit the road with my sign saying Lowell. And then on Sunday night when I was heading back, it said UMass. And I consistently got a ride back and forth about 100 miles. Mm-hmm. Even single women hitchhiked very frequently. We're talking about a very different era.
Very much. I never was in that time of frame and that mindset to go and hitchhike. That just wasn't into what I did and how I moved along and getting transportation. But I can't imagine being picked up by somebody like Bundy and then being hit in the head with a crowbar. And now she's a victim, but she was actually a survivor if she lived for any amount of time. So he would hit them and go to kill them, but a lot of times they weren't dead yet. So he victimized them over and over. So it was like she should be on the survival mode. She should go for it. She should hope in her head. And it makes me feel sad to think that their last words were, please don't kill me. Please don't. Those words just haunt me when I think about it, because there were so many of them and he just had no care about it. He didn't care what he was doing to him.
And Kathy, now that you've said that and you really have contextualized it for people, this is not somebody that we need to be glorifying. I do the fact that you and Emily mentioned do not in any way support fictionalized stories about Bundy or his victims. And there have been so many over the last couple of years. Have you
I have
watched any of
watched-
those?
Yes, I've read every book and I've watched them, and it desensitizes myself a little bit and pushes it back. But you have to remember, when they make a movie, they hire an actor and actresses, and they're working to get money. So they're going to do whatever it takes to make the story believable and make it that way. So when I see these movies, I know they're actors and they're just doing what the writers wrote for them and the directors are telling them what to do. And I know the males that are picked for the part of Bundy, they have to dive really low into the man and understand him 100% on who he is and who he was. That's a difficult thing for me to know what that actor had to go through to be part of his head. And I'm sure that was difficult. But the movie itself was, somebody wrote it and somebody acted in it.
I was actually watching the other day with a friend of mine. They had wanted to see Elizabeth Kendall's documentary about her life with Bundy. And
Yes.
I was watching, there was actually footage of you from the courtroom in it. And I stopped and I said, "Oh, that's Kathy. That's my friend Kathy." But have you watched all of the documentaries that have come out about him? Is that something you watched as well?
Yes, I did. I watched each one.
Is it difficult?
The 4-part series that Netflix did was never mentioning the victims. It was Bundy's tapes. So we got to know Bundy the way he wanted us to think it was Bundy. So we watched the tapes and it was interesting. It was, education to know him, learn what he was and who he talked to, and psychiatrist, and getting through all that. And then at the very end, when they got to the end of the tapes, and it was the last session, and they were going to kill him, and he started saying, "No, please don't kill me.
Ugh.
Please, I'll talk to you more. Don't kill me, please."
Ugh.
And that, just the thought of him saying that and the girls saying that, that eats me up.
Let's step away from him for a second and tell us a little bit about your writing process, because really this could not have been easy. How long did it take you? What is I love asking people about their writing process because I try to teach it to my high school students. Talk to us about your process.
It was difficult, and Emily was wonderful. We'd take a section of the book and go for maybe 2.5 or 3 hours, and she'd get into my head, and I'd tell her what I want to say, and then she sat down and wrote it so eloquently. I give her so much credit for the way she wrote it. She got into my head and said how I wanted it to sound. Just working together like that, we just took sections of a time, like when I had lupus, and we just talked about that for a couple days or a couple interviews, which made me feel in a weird place because I did bring it back in my head. And again, I wanted people to feel what it felt like when I was home alone and sick. So that was something that it took a while for us to talk about. We finally did, and it was good. I enjoyed the way it came out. I was happy with the way it came out.
Now, you live in Florida, and Emily lives outside Chicago. Were you
Yes.
doing this mostly remotely via Zoom or conference calls? How did you actually put the interviews together?
Most of it was on the phone. We didn't get into the Zoom back then as much. We just did phone hours and hours. Every now and then we do a FaceTime or something, but I just felt more comfortable on the phone because I could talk it and close my eyes and feel it, and not have to see her and wondering if she's reacting to what I'm saying, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I just closed my eyes and talked.
Did she record those conversations?
I don't know. I never asked.
And
I know you have to say I'm recording you if you do.
But then she was trying to capture the essence of these different important chapters in your life from as far back as when you were a girl all the way through to the present day.
Did this feel a little bit like therapy in a way?
It did, and it does.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things after I was attacked, I had to leave Tallahassee, and I went down to Miami with my family and my parents and had to recuperate there. I was going through a lot because I had to leave the house, leave my sorority house, and the girls. I needed to be talked to and told I did nothing wrong and that they loved me. And I couldn't get through to any of the sorority sisters. And they never really touched out to me. As I tried on the phone, they just didn't respond. They didn't call me back. that was difficult. That was difficult to get through because I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. It wasn't my fault. And yet I felt like they thought it because they didn't contact me. But one of the ways that really bothered me was the whole attack, the whole recuperation, the whole series around it, all the attention. And I felt like I had this black cape around me, this black, ugly mass. And it started to encompass me. And I could see out of it, but I felt more and more like it was going to close up on me. And as I saw it, I didn't want to live like that. I didn't want to be scared in a little room with no windows and just hang out in there because I was afraid to walk out. And as I saw that mass, I looked way out in the distance and I saw a little island, and it had one palm tree and one beach chair sitting on it. And I wanted to get to that island so bad. So I used to take baby steps to get to my island. And it took a long time, a lot of baby steps. And as I took the baby steps, I turned around and looked, and that black mass were baby steps behind me. And I continued to walk and walk. And I finally got to my goal. And that was my little beach chair. I sat down, I put my toes in the sand. I looked up, and there was no black mass. It was completely gone. I had shed my ugliness that I had around me. And after that, I never got that feeling of being afraid like that he was going to come back or it was going to come back, because I overcame and I beat it. That was my therapy. I didn't have physical mental therapy. Back in 1978, it wasn't all that given to victims. Mm-hmm. And my mama was Cuban, and she's don't talk about our problems outside the house. So she never offered me to have a therapist because she didn't want anyone to know our business. One of the other things when I was attacked, and I started feeling not afraid, but just uncomfortable around men I didn't know. I wasn't afraid they were going to attack me, but I was just uncomfortable with them. And my mouth had been wired for 9 weeks. And as soon as I got it opened up and I could talk, I went to work at a lumber yard because I figured, where can I see the most men in the quickest amount of time so that I can get over this phobia?
Very interesting, and a positive approach on your part, especially for a young person.
I worked there for 3 weeks, and then I decided these guys aren't going to hurt me. Not everyone I see is a bad man. And so after about 3 weeks, I quit. But I did learn that there's a lot of cute construction workers out there that go to lumber yards.
A great way to meet cute guys.
That was a good thing.
Oh my gosh. I'm going to quote Bill to himself here for a second as I ask this question.
Do we have to?
We have to, because it's important for this. So, Kathy, Bill has always said that losing a loved one to violent crime grants you membership in a club that no one wants to join. And I would say that the same is true for anyone who has survived violent crime. What words of encouragement do you have for anyone who has had the misfortune to join the club, if you will?
Seek help. If you need it, go to someone that is professionally can help you. What I've done for me is I've talked about it, and I talk about it to whomever wants to hear me. And that's some way I think I'm getting into helping someone else, and for them to know that it's not their fault. Whatever happened, they're a victim for one day or for years. They really will be a survivor once they get to the other side.
That's beautiful and nicely said. The book is A Light in the Dark, Surviving More Than Ted Bundy.
Kathy, thank you so much for joining us today. We adore having you on here, and you've made both of us cry a little bit, but I think that's
me too.
Thank you so much. This has been wonderful. And where can everybody find the book? Is it out at all major retailers?
Yes, and also Amazon and Books a Million and Barnes & Noble. And they're on several retail stores.
Fantastic. That is going to do it for this episode of Mind Over Murder. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.
Mind Over Murder is a production of Absolute Zero and Another Dog Productions.
Our executive producers are Bill Thomas and Kristin Dilley.
Our logo art is by Pamela Arnois.
Our theme music is by Kevin MacLeod.
Mind Over Murder is distributed in partnership with Crawlspace Media.
You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.
You can also follow our page on the Colonial Parkway Murders on Facebook.
And finally, you can follow Bill Thomas on Twitter at BillThomas56.
Thank you for listening to Mind Over Murder.